Good Wednesday morning. Glad to be with you. I am Kevin Price. Going to spend some time talking to you about you and your business. Get to spend some time with my good friend Lee Kaplan, and he's an attorney, a business attorney extraordinaire. Well, let me tell you, he knows a lot about the law in general and can bring some great insight, and usually does here on the program. And always delighted to have him on the program. And real quickly, tell us about your firm before we talk about our topic today.
Well, our firm does general civil litigation, occasional white-collar criminal matters, but everything from fraud cases to contract disputes to trade secrets and patent cases. Just general commercial practice, all the things that businesses get involved in and have disputes about.
Yep, it's Smizer, Kaplan, and Veselka. That's skv.com. Tell us about your topic for us today. It's a really timely one and tragic all at the same time.
Last night I was watching television, and one of the local channels had this story that David Port, a fairly notorious killer of a postal worker back in 84, 85, is reaching the end of the maximum amount of time they can hold him, and he will get out in June. He received a 75-year sentence, but because for about a 20-year period, Texas had an arrangement where all convicted criminals got whatever the good time credits are and that sort of thing when they behaved in prison, they mandatorily had to be released if those credits worked. So he will get out after approximately 29 years on a 75-year sentence. And this was a case which at the time, if you lived in Houston, was splashed all over the headlines. It was a particularly brutal and senseless murder. It's a postal worker who literally took a friend's route because the friend was either ill or had another commitment that day. And this young man was 18 or 19. I think he was mad at his father. He abducted her, shot her in the head, and dumped her. And
right. What was the motive? Do you recall?
What was what?
The motive?
There was no motive. None.
It was your random sadistic kid killing a bird, but in this case it was a human.
Right. He was at the home. She showed up at the home delivering mail, and he abducted her and killed her. And so I always wondered why he didn't get the death penalty, but sometimes, so anyway, I think what happened is he pled, and he got 75 years. And ultimately, you can only keep people so long, at least the people who were in that time frame, 1977 to, I think, 97. The legislature, perhaps because they wanted to try to keep the prisons less crowded, had this arrangement for good time credits. And, of course, you do want to encourage prisoners to have some incentive to behave in prison rather than, shank a guard or another inmate. And that was repealed at least as to some violent offenders, but the U.S. Supreme Court held that could not be repealed retroactively, so people who were sentenced during that time frame still get those credits. And there are a number of fairly notorious killers who either have gotten out in the last couple of years or are about to get out in the next few years.
Yeah, I've been seeing that more and more, and it's all because of this old credit system that they operated, I guess, until the early 90s. Is that correct?
I think 1997 is when that got changed. And
97. Yeah, it must have been later than that.
It
was weird. It was a really weird system. It to a certain extent it seemed almost toothless when you get down to it. Especially a guy like this who clearly should have spent the rest of his life, if not someone who could, was death penalty worthy.
Well, candidly, there's a reason for having some arrangement like this for a lot of offenders, because you really do want to have some system of punishment or reward for misbehavior in prison. If they're not going anywhere anyway, they have less incentive to behave there and be disruptive and as I say, shank a guard. But
right.
A guy like this gets out now, and of course the victim's family is all still alive, and this is pretty gut-wrenching for them. And who knows, he's 47, 48 years old. I don't know what his predilections are. I kind of doubt that we're going to be able to keep a cop posted outside his home for the next 20 years to make sure he doesn't kill again.
Yeah. Most of her family is alive. Her dad, Albert Schatz, died a month after her body was found. He died of a heart attack. And you can't help but think that something like this contributed to that type of thing. It really is tragic.
So the lesson I take from something like this is the law of unintended consequences affects us all, and you really have to think hard about the long-term results of policies that you hope have some value. That applies to a lot of things, and this is just one of the more gut-wrenching examples of that.
Yep. All right, you were talking to me just before we got on about a protest that's taking place at Smith College. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this doesn't have too much to do with business, except that it shows we are training some of our elite students to be truly boneheaded. Apparently, apparently hundreds of students at Smith College, which is an elite college in Massachusetts, have demonstrated against Christine Lagarde, the head of the International Monetary Fund, giving their commencement address. Now, keep in mind, this is an extremely accomplished woman. She's a French citizen. She is very well respected in business circles, and if there's one thing women complain about, and justifiably, it's the glass ceiling. She's risen above that. She's the head of the IMF, and they've demonstrated against her, I think, because she's part of the system that is corrupt and oppresses women around the world. And that's the kind of thing that's just truly a head shaker.
Yeah, absolutely. You would think that they would be all over that opportunity to learn from someone like her and to sit at her feet, if you will. But I've seen kind of a hostile, anti-intellectual, anti-debate environment for eons on college campuses. Haven't you, really?
Well, but look. When it's not surprising that there are lots of people who are in some sort of a bubble when on a college campus, but I would think university administrators have better sense. And what happened, of course, is that she withdrew because she said she didn't want to detract, which is similar to another commencement speaker somewhere else who was run off. And I just, it just goes to show you that you can be young and stupid just as easily as you can be old and stupid. And what I find fascinating is a lot of these people are going to go into the business world. And in 10 years, I wonder if they will look fondly upon their signature on that petition or if they will be somewhat sheepish about it.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Very good question. It does make one wonder. Yeah, a very interesting story, and again, I think it's very indicative of our culture and our time that I believe academia has for the longest period of time become increasingly anti-intellectual of all places to do so. Hostile increasingly to debate of all kinds of perspectives, speakers showing up and getting whipped cream pies thrown at them, and what do you learn from that?
Well,
how to make a good whipped cream pie?
The truth is that the faculty is in the same bubble, or at least some portion of the faculty. And the question is, university administrators have to, among other things, pacify the alumni, and they need the contributions. And so they walk this tightrope between not angering their faculty and their students and having pies thrown at them, and explaining to alumni who have actually been in the real world for a little while how this kind of nonsense goes on. So I think probably the worst two jobs in the world in the United States are, number one, being a wait person at a diner, and number two, being a university administrator.
Lee Kaplan has a great note to end on. He's with the law firm of Smizer, Kaplan, and Veselka, skv.com. Always brings timely and occasionally, sometimes even inadvertently, humorous insight on what's happening out there in the rural world, and brings it to our audience. Love your perspective, and always enjoy having you on the show.
Great. Well, I look forward to coming back.
You bet. When we come back, much more for you. Do want to remind you, best content here, including this interview, you'll find it over at usdailyreview.com. While there, like it on Facebook, follow it on Twitter. You're listening to The Price of Business.